So think about the last time you were sitting in a slightly too warm conference room or maybe one of those massive university lecture halls.
Oh, yeah, we've all been there.
Right. And you're trying your absolute best to stay engaged, but the speaker clicks over to like slide 42.
The dreaded slide 42.
Exactly. And it's just this massive wall of dense text. They're reading rigidly from a script, and you can practically feel your own brain just powering down into sleep mode.
Yeah, it's brutal.
It is. And whether you're the one struggling to listen or, honestly, terrifyingly, you're the one up on stage giving the presentation, just watching that sea of blank faces.
Feeling totally helpless to change course.
Yes, you feel trapped. Which basically brings us to the focus of today's deep dive. What if that traditional 45-minute presentation format is just completely obsolete?
I mean, the argument is that it absolutely is. It happens every day in boardrooms and classrooms around the world. The traditional format falls incredibly flat, regardless of how vital the information actually is.
Right.
We're basically relying on this delivery mechanism that was designed for a totally different era of information consumption.
Which is why we're looking at this fascinating framework today created by Guy Lakeman. It's known as the Lakeman Method, or sometimes the Lakeman Protocol.
Right.
And we've got a really great stack of source material for this deep dive. We're looking at his actual instructional texts and these highly detailed architectural blueprints that outline the specific methodology.
It's very thorough.
It really is. So our mission today is to figure out how this framework completely redesigns the entire life cycle of an academic lecture or, a professional presentation from the ground up.
And we really need to establish right away, up front, that we aren't discussing the common everyday use of AI as an ad hoc chatbot here.
Like just asking it to write a speech for you.
Exactly. We aren't talking about opening a browser tab, typing, write me a presentation about economics, and just reading whatever generic output it spits out.
Yeah, no, this is way beyond that.
The Lakeman Method is a systematic methodological integration. It's this comprehensive architecture built explicitly to enhance audience memory and, crucially, keep human engagement at the absolute center of the room.
So, to understand the tech, I feel like we first have to understand the foundational problem that Lakeman is actually trying to solve.
Right.
Because the blueprints spend a lot of time defining something they call the unsustainable balance of modern pedagogy, which is, a lot of academic jargon.
It is a bit dense.
So let's ground that for a second. What does that actually mean for you, the listener, if you're the one asked to give a major talk next week?
So imagine a physical weighing scale.
Yeah.
On one side of the scale, you have preparation and research.
Yuck.
In our current paradigm, a presenter spends a wildly disproportionate amount of time, energy, and cognitive load on this side. You're spending dozens, maybe hundreds of hours researching, writing a static script, manually building visual aids and presentation software.
Tinkering with fonts and animations.
Exactly, all that tedious stuff. And you're locking yourself into a completely linear lesson plan. So all the weight is on that prep side of the scale,
leaving absolutely zero weight for the other side of the scale, which the blueprints label audience engagement.
Because your human energy was entirely depleted during the assembly phase, when you finally step onto the stage, you have no mental bandwidth left for adaptive pacing.
Right, you're just exhausted.
You can't establish real-time relevance or respond to interactive feedback because you're locked into your script. The sunk cost of creating those 50 slides means you are going to get through them, no matter what the audience's faces are telling you.
You're just marching through it. So the Lakeman Method resolves this structural inefficiency by explicitly dividing the labor. It balances human authority with computational scale.
Exactly.
And here is how I'm picturing this division of labor. Think of like a high-end restaurant kitchen. The AI in the Lakeman Protocol is basically the sous chef.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, it's doing all the heavy structural lifting before the doors even open. It's chopping the onions, it's boiling the stock, it's prepping the ingredients. In the context of a lecture, the AI handles the massive data processing, the structural assembly of the research, and the content generation.
Because computational scale is perfectly suited for those exact tasks. Machines are exceptional at sorting large volumes of data quickly.
Right. And because the AI sous chef is doing all that tedious prep work, it frees you, the human presenter, to be the executive chef standing at the pass.
You get to focus 100% on the final delivery.
Yes. You focus on the guest's actual experience in the dining room. The human brings the empathy, the pedagogical expertise, the contextual nuance, and the ability to actually, read the room.
The human isn't replaced in this model. Their cognitive energy is just preserved for high-value audience connection. By offloading the structural assembly, the presenter is actually far more present.
Makes total sense.
So if we follow your restaurant kitchen analogy, we should probably look at how the AI actually preps those ingredients before the audience even sits down.
Yeah, let's get into that. Walk me through phase 1, pre-lecture preparation. How does the AI actually organize all this raw material without just making some generic summary?
It begins with what is called the Lakeman prompt architecture.
Okay.
You take all your raw academic data, so your primary research papers, existing syllabi, reading lists, even your own messy, unstructured notes.
Like literally just a brain dump.
Literally just a brain dump.
Yeah.
And you route it all through a large language model using this specific architecture. The AI is instructed to sort this raw data specifically to balance cognitive load and ensure a logical narrative flow.
So wait, stop there for a second. How does an AI know what a human's cognitive load is? Like, how does it know when we are going to get overwhelmed by too much information?
Well, the prompts are designed based on established cognitive science principles. The system maps the density of the new vocabulary and the complexity of the concepts against an average human attention span.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it actively breaks dense clusters of data into digestible modules. And from that sorting process, it outputs 3 specific assets: distilled talking points, generative visual prompts, which we'll get to in a moment,
Wait to get to those.
and anticipated audience questions based on the gaps in the data.
I find it brilliant that it anticipates the audience's confusion before you even step on stage. But there's a specific step in the protocol here that caught my eye because it forces a very particular narrative framework. Step 1.1 of the prep phase requires you to create a debate title that defines a conflict.
Right, because conflict is the engine of human engagement. If there's no problem to solve, the human brain simply has no biological reason to pay attention.
And that feeds directly into their 4-step narrative framework for structuring the talk. Step 1, establish the problem. Step 2, define the purpose for solving it. Step 3, outline the method. And step 4, present the solution.
It's classic ancient storytelling applied to dense data.
It is, but I have to push back on this entire prep phase for a second. If I'm just dumping my raw research into a funnel, having an algorithm sort it for cognitive load, and outputting a script based on a rigid 4-step storytelling formula.
I know where you're going with this.
Right. Like, aren't we just generating a shinier, highly polished, but still completely generic robot-written presentation? Doesn't this strip the unique human voice out of the research?
That is the most common critique of algorithmic writing. Absolutely. And it's exactly why the AI-powered truth verification step is built into the core architecture.
Okay, tell me about that.
Lakeman integrates a secondary AI analysis that scrutinizes the generated narrative structure, specifically looking for logical fallacies.
Walk me through how that actually works, though. How does a language model verify truth? I thought they were basically just predicting the next word in a sentence.
Well, in this protocol, the verification model isn't making subjective judgments. It is strictly cross-referencing the generated narrative against your uploaded primary sources.
Ah, so it's checking its own work against your original brain dump.
Exactly. It actively hunts for leaps in logic, unsupported claims, or manipulative rhetorical techniques that might have emerged during the storytelling restructuring. The goal is to ensure the foundational argument is structurally sound and strictly supported by the data provided, not just, well phrased.
So it keeps it honest.
Yes. The blueprints make a very clear distinction here between a quick win and the architecture.
The quick win is what most of us are doing right now when we use these tools. We paste a paragraph and say, hey, simplify this jargon or make this sound more professional.
Exactly, and that merely polishes the surface of an already flawed structure. The Lakeman Method aims for the architecture. It uses the full prompt system to generate a deeply adaptive, modular lesson plan based entirely on verified research.
Wow.
You aren't walking out with a fixed word-for-word script. You're walking out with a flexible framework of validated concepts.
Okay, so having a modular, logically verified plan on your laptop is great in theory, but the real test is what happens when you actually stand up in front of a room full of living, breathing, totally unpredictable people.
The real world.
Exactly, which brings us to phase 2, active delivery. And this phase completely flips the script on what a presentation even looks like physically.
This is arguably the most radical shift in the entire protocol.
Mm-hmm.
When you use this method, you leave the pre-rendered slide deck behind entirely.
It was just terrifying.
There are no static slides.
If I'm standing in front of an audience of 500 people and you tell me I have no slides, I'm going to have a panic attack. Let's just be real. What am I looking at instead?
You are looking at the live lecturer dashboard while the AI transcription engine runs in the background. As you speak, the engine processes a live audio transcript of your voice and compares it in real time against that modular lesson plan you built in phase 1.
So the system knows exactly where I am in the material at any given millisecond.
Yes. The dashboard displays live pacing metrics to you, the speaker. But more importantly, it dynamically generates the visual aids for the audience behind you, based exclusively on the words you just spoke.
Let's make this concrete. If I'm giving a lecture on a complex economics theory, and I notice the audience looks a little lost, so I suddenly decide, on the fly, to compare the economy to the flow of water in a plumbing system.
Right.
The AI hears my spoken words, understands the analogy, and instantly generates a visual of pipes and water pressure on the massive screen behind me.
Generative, context-aware visual prompts replace fixed slides. Because the AI processed your foundational architecture in phase 1, it already understands the conceptual boundaries of your topic.
That's crazy.
When you speak, it isn't starting from scratch. It's pulling from a pre-cached visual vocabulary to minimize latency. The visual supports your spoken word organically.
So the visual is following my lead rather than me chasing the visual. That is wild. But what about when things go completely off the rails? Someone in the front row raises their hand and asks a question that derails the entire topic.
Right, the unpredictable element.
Yeah, the blueprints detail a system involving a trigger and an AI pivot. How does that work?
Well, a trigger is an event that disrupts the planned narrative flow. That could be a highly complex, unexpected question from the audience. Or, if the venue is equipped for it, a live drop in audience sentiment.
Meaning what?
Meaning the system detects that people are physically disengaging, getting confused, or getting bored based on their micro-expressions or posture.
So the system spots the glazed over eyes before the speaker even does.
Exactly. And when a trigger is hit, the AI initiates a pivot. It instantly retrieves relevant data points from your preloaded research repository that address the specific disruption.
Okay.
It might flash a brand new pedagogical analogy on your dashboard tailored to that audience member's question. And crucially, it recalculates your remaining lecture time in milliseconds, suggesting which upcoming modules to condense so you still cover the core syllabus despite taking a 10-minute detour.
It is functioning exactly like a GPS system in a car. You miss your exit because someone asked a question about a random tangent, and the AI just says recalculating route and figures out the most efficient way to get you back to the main point before your hour is up.
That's a great way to put it. It acts as a dynamic reallocation of your time and your cognitive resources on the fly.
I love the GPS analogy, but I really have to challenge the human element here again. I'm trying to picture myself on stage.
Sure.
If I'm standing there, a student asks a complex question, and I immediately look down at a dashboard to read a live pivot prompt that a machine just generated for me.
Yeah?
Don't we completely lose that human empathy and connection we talked about in the very beginning? How am I not just a meat puppet for the algorithm at that point?
That is a critical tension for sure. And it brings us to one of the core tenets of the Lakeman Method, which is explicitly stated in the source text.
Yeah.
Mastery is achieved not by surrendering to the algorithm, but by directing it.
Directing it how exactly? Because if I'm using the machine's analogy to answer the question, I feel like I'm just a conduit.
You have to remember the dashboard is a co-pilot, not a teleprompter. It's offering diagnostic tools, instant data retrieval, and time management calculations. It hands you the right conceptual wrench.
Okay, I see.
But you, the human being, still dictate the tone, the empathy, the eye contact, and the final articulation of the concept. The AI doesn't force you to read its analogy word for word.
Right.
It offers it as a life raft when your cognitive load is maxed out trying to handle a difficult question. Because the AI is doing the panicked mental math of how much time do I have left, you have the mental space to actually look the questioner in the eye and connect with them.
So the machine handles the logistics of the room, allowing the human to handle the emotion of the room. I can see how that preserves the executive chef role.
Precisely.
Okay, so the lecture ends. The detour was successful. The GPS got us back on track. Everyone packs up and goes home. Normally, that PowerPoint file goes into a folder on my hard drive and is dead and forgotten forever.
Traditional methods produce what is essentially a dead-end delivery. The event ends and the value dissipates.
But phase 3 is called the post-lecture life cycle. In this framework, the end of the presentation is actually just the raw fuel for the next phase. They refer to this concept as capturing the exhaust.
Presentation exhaust is a really fascinating way to frame it. The exhaust consists primarily of the live audio transcript of what was actually said, combined with the Q&A interactions that just happened.
Okay.
In this protocol, that exhaust is immediately captured by the system and put to work while the audience is still packing their bags.
What is the system actually doing with that exhaust data, though? Like, what does the audience get out of it?
The AI immediately generates 3 assets for the attendees. First, it synthesizes summaries of the key takeaways based on the live delivery, not the original plan, and distributes them to the audience's devices.
Oh, that's smart.
Second, it creates diagnostic quizzes. And the brilliant mechanism here is that these knowledge checks are based exclusively on what was covered in the live room.
Including the unscripted tangents.
That is the key. If you took a 15-minute detour about a highly specific unscripted case study because of an audience question, the post-lecture quiz reflects that detour. It's not a generic, pre-written test from a textbook.
Wow.
And third, the system develops personalized learning pathways, recommending specific further reading to individual attendees based on the actual questions they raised during the session.
It completely customizes the post-game experience for the listener based on their unique interaction with the material.
Exactly.
And speaking of the listener's experience, there is a highly specific, deeply psychological detail in the protocol about what happens right after the presentation concludes.
You're referring to the emulation protocol.
Yes, step 4 of the Lakeman Protocol. To genuinely enhance audience memory, attendees are given 5 minutes of silence to create a 1-minute stand-up presentation of their own experience. The goal is to emulate the AI responses. Then, the audience literally stands up and votes on these responses person by person.
It's a really striking exercise in retrieval practice.
Followed by, and I'm going to quote from the source blueprint here, a tea and music break and time for the AI to analyze parts 1 to 5.
Yes.
It's so incredibly tactile. You have this hyper-advanced AI running live transcriptions and dynamic visual generation, and then everyone stops to do a low-tech 1-minute speech, vote on it by hand, and drink tea while the supercomputer thinks.
That tactile nature highlights that the method is deeply grounded in human psychology and memory retention mechanisms. When an audience just listens to a great speaker, they often experience the illusion of competence.
Meaning they think they learned it just because it sounded good?
Right. They feel like they understand it because the speaker was clear, but they haven't actually encoded the memory. Forcing the audience to instantly synthesize and articulate their experience out loud cements the knowledge.
And the tea break.
Taking a deliberate tea break allows the cognitive dust to settle, giving the human brain time to consolidate the memory, while giving the computational analysis time to process the massive amounts of data just generated.
It acknowledges that human brains need downtime just as much as servers need processing time. Zooming out from the tea break, there's a much bigger picture emerging here. All of this exhaust data feeds into what the blueprints call the symbiotic loop.
This loop is where we see the transition from a single, isolated lecture into an evolving educational ecosystem. The AI synthesis takes all that exhaust, the engagement metrics, the timing data, the analysis of where the audience struggled, which analogies worked best, and which questions were asked most frequently.
And it feeds all of those insights right back into the prep engine for the next time you have to give the same presentation.
Exactly. The system automatically updates the foundational lesson plan for the next cohort. It learns from its own execution. If a specific concept consistently causes a drop in audience sentiment or generates a flood of confused questions every time you deliver it, the system flags that structural weakness and restructures that module before you even begin preparing for the next term.
It functionally learns from the audience's confusion. Think about the implications of that for a moment. Think about how much better a university experience would be if a professor's slides from 1998 had actually evolved based on 20 years of real-time audience feedback instead of just being recycled verbatim every single semester.
You are looking at refined human delivery built on an empirically superior data-backed foundation that improves with every single iteration.
Okay, so let's make this actionable for the listener. If someone is listening to this right now and thinking, I need to implement this for my massive quarterly review presentation next month, How do they actually start? Because flipping a switch and suddenly having an AI generating live graphics behind you while you speak without slides sounds like a recipe for a total meltdown.
Oh, absolutely. The methodology explicitly warns against attempting an overnight overhaul. Deploying this framework requires a phased, progressive adoption. It's structured like a staircase to build trust between the human and the system.
Walk us through the steps. What is step 1?
Step 1 is simply adopting the prep engine, usually recommended for weeks 1 and 2. This is an incredibly low-risk, high-reward phase. You simply begin by routing your existing syllabi, your rough notes, and your research through the LLMs using the Lakeman prompt architecture.
Okay.
You get comfortable letting the AI generate your modular outlines, balance your cognitive load, and anticipate questions.
So you're just getting comfortable letting the sous chef prep the ingredients in the kitchen. You're still delivering the presentation exactly how you normally would.
Correct. Then you move to step 2, usually in weeks 3 and 4. Automating the exhaust. You introduce live transcription during your delivery, but solely to capture the Q&A and generate those post-lecture summaries and personalized reading pathways for your audience.
Got it.
You still aren't changing your actual delivery style. You're just capturing the data on the back end.
Easing the audience and yourself into the new format. And then finally, step 3.
Step 3 happens in month 2 and beyond. You activate the live copilot. That is when you finally drop to the static slides and deploy the real-time lecture dashboard. You integrate live sentiment tracking, the dynamic visual prompting on the screen behind you, and instantaneous pivot calculations in the room.
It's a brilliant psychological on-ramp. You build trust with the AI gradually until you're ready to let it co-pilot the live room.
Exactly.
Well, we have covered incredible ground today. We've moved from rigid scripts and static walls of text to an ecosystem where an AI co-pilot actively maps audience cognitive load, verifies the logical truth of a narrative, generates live art based purely on your spoken words, and dynamically recalculates your lecture time when someone asks a difficult question.
It fundamentally alters the life cycle of human communication in a professional setting.
It really does. But, stepping back from all this brilliant architecture, it leaves me with a somewhat profound thought to consider. If the Lakeman method and frameworks that will inevitably follow it allow our technology to perfectly map to our cognitive load, if the AI can instantly pivot to keep our attention perfectly engaged, anticipating our questions before we even ask them, what does that actually mean for the human skill of listening?
It completely challenges the necessity of active listening.
Right. If every presentation, every lecture, and every corporate meeting in the future is custom tailored to our exact learning style and adapts to our sentiment in real time so we never get bored or confused, will we lose the patience for difficult, unstructured, uniquely human communication?
That's the real question.
Will we even know how to listen to someone who doesn't have an AI co-pilot optimizing their empathy and their pacing? It makes you wonder if sitting in that sterile conference room, struggling to stay awake on slide 42, was actually a cognitive muscle we needed to keep flexing, something for you to mull over the next time you find yourself stuck in a rigid, static meeting.